Thank you for watching another video. Make sure you remember to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Today I've got Donnie Roberts, former photographer for the Dispatch of Lexington. So Donnie, thanks for coming.
Well, I appreciate you having me over here, David.
Okay. So
quite an honor, actually.
Oh, it's an honor for you to have me have you here. How did you get started in photography?
Well, I can give you the long story, cut down to brief story. Is had an interest in it when my mom had a Kodak Instamatic camera, and I would take that out and take pictures with it. And I always tended to lean toward pictures of people's expressions. Like I like to try to sneak up on her and scare her, and she would turn around with this horrified look, and I'd snap the picture. And that was kind of where it all began. I just found that interesting. And so anyway, when I got to high school, my chemistry teacher was the yearbook photo editor, and he showed me how to make prints in a darkroom, and I was fascinated by that. And he told me I should try out for the yearbook staff next year, and I thought, well, maybe. So I got a camera for Christmas that year, and loved it. And the next year I got on the yearbook staff and took pictures of documenting school. The senior year basically is when I was on the yearbook staff, and the guidance counselors would ask what you want to do for a career, where do you want to go to college, and I had no idea. All I knew was I didn't want to sit inside a room or an office, and she knew about my photography interest. I'd won a couple of awards for amateurs, high school level, and she said, you do know that you can go to college and study photography? And I was like, what? I had no idea. And she gave me some information about Randolph Community College in Asheboro, and I went down and visited, fell in love with the place, and as soon as the guidance counselor said that, I knew, like, that's what I want to do, is photography. And that's how I got started, and I just always tended to lean toward photojournalism because it was capturing expressions and capturing stories, or tell stories through visual photos. And so that was my concentration at Randolph, was the photojournalism program, and then that just kind of went from there.
Okay. Now, I've known a lot of people that's gone through their program, including you. So how would you describe their program to somebody who's interested in going to it?
Well, you better be really, really serious about it, because it's hard. You don't think that photography could be hard, but you have to get into the science of it. Working with densitometers, you got to learn processing, and they still teach film processing, and then you get into the digital part, which is what everybody pretty much uses today. But the film stuff translates well into digital if you understand the film process. It's a lot easier to learn the digital, but it's really hard. It's 2 years of 10 to 12 hours a day, every day.
Yeah.
And it's stuff that you could learn on your own eventually, but it'll take you about your whole life to do it. They combine it down into a 2-year program, and it's really intense. But when you succeed with it and you learn from the professors or instructors, whatever they call them at community college level, it's just a great feeling, and you really know. When you come out of Randolph Community College, you know more about photography than about 90% of the other people in the world that have cameras.
Yeah. Wait for a train to go by. I'm still in the studio here. It's just something we got to live with here in Thomasville. So, you didn't start your first job at the Dispatch. Now, where did you start to begin with?
My first job was in Lumberton, North Carolina, at the Robertsonian. And when I graduated from Randolph, I sent out 48 resumes to North Carolina newspapers and Florida newspapers mainly, and I got one response, a positive, and that was from Lumberton, and they just happened to have an opening for a photographer. And so I went down there and interviewed and was offered a job on the spot, and I took it on the spot, and that was in 1983 in the summer. And so that was where I started, and I was there for 2 years before moving on. And
okay.
I don't know if you want the whole history or not, but I went from there to Pembroke State University, which is UNC Pembroke now, and did PR photography for their marketing department for a year.
Okay.
And thoroughly nice school, nice people, but it wasn't the kind of photography that I wanted to do. I wanted to get back in newspapers, so I got a job in South Carolina at the Lancaster News, and I was there 3 years, and then the dispatch job came up, and I was there for 30 years.
Okay, so 30 years there, so a staple around Lexington and Davidson counties. A lot of people follow your work. At your career with the dispatch, out of all the photos I kept up with watching you, the one that sticks out in my mind is kind of a more recent one when you had the furniture plant fire and the very large fire and the silhouette of the fireman there.
Right.
I've been in a lot of taking fire pictures, but I've never caught a photo like that. What was that whole scene like while you were there?
Well, that was a fire that was so big and so spread out that it was hard to really zero in on a good storytelling picture. I mean, I took a lot of pictures of the building burning, people's expressions watching the fire. It was a big city event for people who came out to watch this fire, and I just really wasn't happy with what I had. I had something, but you want to get something different than what everybody else had already seen, and so I thought, well, let me walk over here. It was behind what used to be my funeral home. I think it's Davidson Funeral Home, and I just walked down, and I was standing around just wondering what kind of pictures to take. They're taking all the standard pictures, and then there's this huge flame with the buildings burning, and I just happened to see a little figure walking down there. So I just grabbed the camera and quick focused on the fireman, snapped that one, and then he was out of the scene in no time, and it was just kind of a fleeting kind of thing. And I found out later that actually was police chief. The fire chief. Okay. I had no idea. I saw it the fireman, but it was the fire chief who was analyzing the situation and walking around the scene. So.
Okay.
But yeah, it was one of those things where when I saw the magnitude of the fire and that little person, I thought, well, that's a good storytelling picture if I caught it, just because of the size of the fire.
Okay. Now, over the years, how have you seen photojournalism progress, and what's your take on it from when you started to now?
Well, the basic core of photojournalism is still the same. You want to capture a story or tell a story through, or convey an idea or feelings through pictures, usually with people in them, because you're documenting life in your town and your community. And it's still that way, but you just don't see it practiced as much now because there's a lot more demand on people's time. There's fewer photographers trying to do the same amount of work as before, and they don't have the time to really go to a scene and stay there for an extra hour, to really work the whole scene and try to look for those things, little moments that tell a story. A lot of times it's like you get there, you got 15 minutes, and then you got to go somewhere else. And when I started, there were a lot more photographers at each newspaper, and so a photographer would have an hour or two to go to an assignment, and then over time that just dwindled down to where you had 10 minutes, 15 minutes to spend there. And a big part of that is like you get to a scene or a person. It's about a person or a scene, and you get there and you need to get to know the person or get to know the scene, get to know the story. What is the story that people need to know? And that takes time to think that through. And so that was one of the disappointing things towards the last 10 years of photography and newspapers is just not having the time to really get in there, really get to know your subject, whether it's a building or a person or an event. It's time. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but it's kind of rambling.
That's close enough. But before coming on here, we talked about how the change, and then less and less newspapers have their own staff photographers anymore. And which led, hey, you and a bunch of other people are no longer the staff photographers. But now you've changed careers and you're a truck driver.
Right.
So, so that's a big change. But you're still taking pictures. And then if people, we'll post it up on the bottom of the comments of the video, your Instagram page.
Right.
I haven't looked to see how many followers you got on there. But I noticed you'll take pictures and you just do it with a cell phone, or you got a regular camera now, or
No, it's all cell phone
all
right
cell
now.
phone?
'Cause I just
Yeah.
try to travel compact.
travel light? Okay.
And there's times I wish I had the big camera with the big lens when I see something off in the distance.
Yeah.
But I just have to live with it right now. The truck driving is, it's there's some similarities in that and photojournalism, in the fact that every day you don't know what's going to happen. You have to be able to react and adapt to your situation. And I get sort of the same thing in truck driving as I got in there, as far as just having an unpredictable future. Like the immediate future, I don't know what's going to happen today. You try to have an idea, but you kind of flow with it. And then it's a chance to get out and meet people and see places, and that's what photojournalism was for me too.
Okay.
The one thing I miss the most about photojournalism at the Dispatch is like not going to somebody's house or to an event and getting to capture those nice moments that just speak to the whole story, or cause somebody to like feel what that person's feeling, that kind of thing. But in truck driving, your main job is to move this trailer from here to over there. But in between there is when I'm always looking around, and if I get a chance to meet and talk to people, especially like at truck stops and things, I find that to be really interesting.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, because some of the areas you're traveling, I'm noticing out in the West and stuff. I know I've traveled that way like once or twice when in the service and stuff. So I know some of the areas that you're traveling through and remember them. So when you were at the Dispatch, we talked about the fire photo, but what was some of the things or the pictures that stick out the most in your whole career that you've taken?
Yeah, a lot of sports pictures, especially championship games, state championship games, because at the championship game level, playoff level, everything is more magnified. Like every play means something more, because it's either to go on and play another game or you end your season. So there's a lot of the athletes just really seem to bring it up a notch at that level, and that makes me have to make sure I'm bringing my A game too, because I got to capture this stuff. There's several pictures that really stand out. Sports-wise, I remember like baseball. North Davidson won the state championship. There was a play toward the end, where the North Davidson runner on third made it home, and as he's running toward the plate with the winning run, you can see in the background the other team in the dugout, all with these looks of desperation or disappointment with their hands up on their heads.
Okay.
And that's just something that you kind of knew it was going to happen, or it might happen, and had to be ready for it. When North Davidson softball team won their first state championship, that was a big moment. I had a picture of Coach Mike Lambros hugging his wife right after the game, and up underneath his cap, you can't see it in the newspaper, but when I zoomed in on the picture, you can see that there's a Bible verse up under Mike's cap that he always had. It was a Philippines Bible verse. I can't remember what it was exactly right now, but as far as, I love to do slice of life pictures, like they call them feature photos. It's people just doing things, normal things that might be a little bit unique. Like one of my favorite ones is I heard a call on the police scanner at the office one day about a chicken holding up traffic on I-85 business, and I thought, if I get out there before the police get there, that'll be a funny picture of a chicken holding up a whole line of traffic. So I just zipped out there as fast as I could, and I drove up right at the same time the highway patrol drove up, and the highway patrolman got out and was trying to chase the chicken out of the road. And used the picture of the patrolman running, scaring the chicken, and the chicken's just strutting, like he's got his leg up in the air. And that, to me, that just made it, I just laughed when I took the picture. I couldn't believe my luck.
Yeah.
It went from a chicken blocking traffic to a patrolman chasing a chicken in front of traffic. And then there's lots of pictures from news events that are not pleasant. Never really like to go to wrecks at all. 'Cause, to me, 90% of accidents in traffic are preventable. But there's still, it's what's happening in the community, so you have to go and document what's happening. There were so many pictures. I tried to do a little review of pictures when I finished at the dispatch, and it was really hard to go down and narrow it down. I was trying to think of some more, but it may come to me in a minute. Or I can send you some. You can flash them up on the screen or something if you want.
Okay. As far as locally, who are some of your favorite photographers?
Oh boy. Well, I gotta say, one of my favorites is Matthew Lewis. He lives in Thomasville, and formerly of the Washington Post Pulitzer Prize winner. He just moved here out of nowhere to me, and one day I met him, and he's just a phenomenal man, phenomenal photographer, and he was always he'd go out of his way to like tell me how much he liked my pictures, and to me that was a huge compliment, because he wasn't somebody who's just going to blow smoke about something, you know. And actually, I have a really nice portrait of him in his home studio, surrounded by many pictures of his famous works, and he loved that photo.
Yeah, I know when I was always see him taking pictures, and I'd be somewhere taking pictures, I'd kind of stop and I'd just watch Matthew.
Yeah.
And I'd see him get in a weird position, so I'm like, why is he crouching like that? Why is he doing that? And then after he left, I kind of look around and I'm like, oh, I see what he sees now. And I wouldn't have thought of that.
He's one of those people that if you watch him, he's one of those people there's a certain level that's they're so good they look like they're not putting out any effort. But
exactly.
He was always thinking. He might not have the camera up to his eye, but he was watching, and he really came up with some outstanding stuff. And some other ones, like Jerry Wolford from the News and Record in Greensboro. He's been a good friend of mine and really valuable on feedback. And when I have something I need to ask him, how do I crop this picture, or what should I have done differently, he was always right there to offer me whatever information I was wanting from him. And then there are young photographers that blow me away. And one worked at the Journal. Her name was Allison Isley, and unfortunately she was a victim of some layoffs as well. And so she's currently not working at the Journal now, but she had a really good knack of just capturing moments that had emotion to them, that made you feel something. When you saw a picture that she took of somebody, you felt like you knew that person, because there was just so much heart in the picture. And I think that's really good. And then there's so many. I mean, Scott Hoffman, who lived in Lexington and worked at the News and Record before he retired, and then if you go back, H. Lee Waters. I mean, I've tried to look at as much of his work as I could over the decades, but he had so much work that you just can't see it all.
Yeah, exactly.
But he was a great historian, and that I always keep him in mind when I was doing pictures of events that were going to be remembered down the road. Like, well, what would H. Lee do with this? What does this picture look like?
Yeah.
And try to get that.
Okay. All right. Well, like I said, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much.
Wraps up. Like I said, remember, we'll post a link to your Instagram page.
Yeah.
Make sure you follow him, because he'll do some great stories. It might be a little pause in between. It's not on a regular schedule, but when he does a photo dump, it's a lot of photos and good stories behind them. I enjoy following you.
I appreciate it. And truck driving is like, it doesn't leave any time for doing that on the road much. So it's usually once I get back from a trip, I'll work up something. It's not like a everyday kind of thing, just because there's not time to do it properly that way.
Yeah. Okay.
But I appreciate you having me over here, and it's great to see you again.
Okay. Same here.
And I should say that David's one of the people that influences me too, because he's out there doing really creative work. And I'm sitting here looking at some of it right now that's off camera, and it's stuff I've never seen before. And I appreciate you doing that. And
thank you for coming up here.
Yeah.
Like I said, make sure you like the channel. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next week.